Blackbeard. You just hear the name, and wow, what an image pops into your head, doesn't it?
It really does.
That massive black beard, maybe smoke curling up from fuses tucked into it. It's just the ultimate pirate look, the one that's really stuck.
Absolutely. But, behind that whole terrifying persona, there was a real guy, Edward Teach.
Right. And that's what we're diving into today, trying to sort of peel back the layers of the legend and find the actual history of the man.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how that legend took hold and, well, never really let go. We've pulled together quite a bit for this detailed historical books trying to piece his life together, but also, recent news about the wreck they think is his ship.
The Queen Anne's Revenge.
That's the one. So our plan really is to get a handle on the key parts of his story. Where did he even come from? How did he become Blackbeard? What were his tactics? What's the deal with that famous ship? And how did it all end for him?
And why, after all this time, are we still talking about him? What makes him stand out? That's what we want to figure out with you.
Let's set sail then.
Okay, so the beginning. His early life. It's kind of surprising, isn't it? For someone so notorious, we actually know very little for sure.
It's true, yeah. The historical records are pretty hazy there.
Yeah.
The best guess seems to be Bristol in England, which makes sense, a major port city.
Right. Growing up around ships, the sea, it would definitely shape you.
For sure. And there's even some thought, well, speculation really, that his family might have been reasonably well off.
Oh, why is that?
Because he could read and write, which, wasn't all that common for your average sailor back then.
Yeah.
It suggests maybe some level of education, perhaps a slightly higher social standing than you might expect.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe a literate young man from Bristol. How does he get from there to, well, piracy in the Caribbean?
Well, he shows up in the Caribbean right around the start of the 1700s. And you have to picture the scene. It was a real hotbed of activity. Tons of shipping, yes, but also constant fighting between England, France, Spain.
Yeah.
Jostling for control.
A lot of chaos, but maybe opportunity too.
Exactly. A very volatile mix. So Teach starts out, it seems, as a privateer for the English. Basically, a sort of government-sanctioned pirate attacking enemy ships during wartime.
Okay.
And then, crucially, he ends up joining the crew of Captain Benjamin Hornigold. Hornigold was a big name based out of New Providence, Nassau. Yeah. Which was pretty much pirate central back then.
Right. I've heard of Hornigold. He seems important in Teach's story.
Oh, definitely. Hornigold clearly saw something in Teach's skill, maybe leadership potential. He eventually gave Teach command of his own ship, a small sloop.
Ah, so that's his step up, his own command.
That's the launching point for his own career, yeah. And then 1717 becomes a really pivotal year. Hornigold decides to take a part and basically retires from piracy.
Leaving a gap at the top.
A big one. And Teach steps right into it. Yeah. And this is where things get really interesting. In November 1717, he captures this big French merchant ship called La Concorde.
Not just any ship, I take it.
No, this was a major prize, a large vessel. And Teach, he doesn't just take the cargo. He keeps the ship, refits it, loads it up with cannons. Something like 40 guns.
40 cannons, wow.
Yeah, a huge amount for a pirate vessel then. He renames her the Queen Anne's Revenge. And suddenly, he's not just a pirate captain, he's commanding one of the most powerful pirate ships around. That really cemented his status.
Okay, so he's got this incredible ship, this floating fortress, basically. But a ship needs a crew. How did he get people to sign on for such a dangerous life, especially with him?
Well, he seems to have been pretty savvy about recruitment. You gotta imagine these smoky taverns in places like Nassau or Tortuga.
Full of sailors maybe unhappy with their lot.
Exactly. Guys who'd faced brutal conditions on merchant ships, or maybe even strict Royal Navy discipline. They felt overlooked, maybe exploited. And piracy. It offered, well, the dream of getting rich quick, sure, but also freedom. No more captains taking the lion's share, no more rigid rules, plus adventure.
And Blackbeard himself must have been a big part of the draw, that image.
Oh, absolutely. He was apparently quite charismatic, despite the terrifying look. And that look was key. This tall guy, the huge Blackbeard, which he supposedly sometimes stuck smoldering rope fuses into before a battle.
Just imagine seeing that coming at you.
Right. It created this, demonic aura, pure psychological intimidation. He was also supposedly a good talker, painting pictures of the plunder, the easy life, the rebellion against the authorities who, he argued, treated sailors badly.
So it wasn't just greed then. There was this element of sticking it to the man.
Yeah, kind of a rebellious spirit. And look, life on a pirate ship required order. But Blackbeard seems to have balanced that with a certain camaraderie. He dealt with dissent quickly, apparently, but he also, shared laughs, built respect.
And the loot, how did that work?
That was crucial. They had a surprisingly democratic system. Unlike the Navy or merchant ships where the officers got rich, pirates generally shared the spoils much more evenly.
Yeah.
Everyone got a fair cut, according to agreed-upon rules.
That must have built serious loyalty.
Definitely. It wasn't just fairness, it was smart. It kept the crew invested, loyal, willing to fight. And his reputation just grew and grew. He became this symbol of defiance, this figure of almost mythical dread. For some sailors, he was probably someone to look up to, in a strange way, someone who took control.
A very complex figure emerges, not just a brute. Let's talk more about that ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. It feels so central to his legend. It wasn't always his, though.
No, it had quite a history before him. It started life back in 1710, built as a French privateer ship named La Concorde.
French build, okay.
Yep, and it served various roles for the French even, disturbingly, as a slave ship involved in the transatlantic trade. It got sold, ended up back with the French Navy briefly, then sold again for commerce, still in the slave trade.
A grim history even before Blackbeard.
Very grim. And then, near Martinique, November 1717, Blackbeard captures it.
And then he makes it his own.
Totally transforms it. After dealing with the enslaved people aboard a dark part of the story, often glossed over, he renames it Queen Anne's Revenge. And like we said, he adds a lot more cannons, makes it a real warship.
Any idea why he chose that name, Queen Anne's Revenge?
Well, historians debate it. Could be a nod to Queen Anne's War, the War of the Spanish Succession, which had ended a few years earlier. Maybe Tiche fought in it.
Plausible.
Or something it might show sympathy for the Jacobite cause, the supporters of the Stuart monarchs. Queen Anne being the last of them.
Yeah.
It's hard to know for sure.
But under that name, with all those cannons, it became feared. Where did he sail it?
All over. The Caribbean, obviously, but also across the Atlantic to the west coast of Africa. Attacking British ships, Dutch, Portuguese, anyone with valuable cargo, really.
Made quite a name for the ship and for himself. But surprisingly, he didn't actually have it for that long, did he?
No, it's actually a pretty short period. Maybe 6 or 7 months as his flagship. Because in June 1718, not long after that famous blockade of Charleston Harbor.
Right, where he held the whole port hostage, basically.
Yeah, pretty audacious. But shortly after that, while trying to get into Beaufort Inlet, North Carolina, the Queen Anne's Revenge ran aground.
Just ran aground. An accident.
Well, that's the big question. One account says it just hit a sandbar. Simple mistake in tricky waters. But there's a strong theory that Blackbeard might have done it deliberately.
On purpose. Why wreck his amazing ship?
The thinking is maybe it was a way to downsize his crew. Get rid of some of the men, strand them, and then sail off with the most valuable loot and his most trusted followers on a smaller ship, the Adventure. Keep a bigger share for himself.
Wow. That's ruthless, if true. Calculated.
It fits the pattern of a pirate looking out for number one, perhaps sensing the tide was turning against piracy. Anyway, grounded it was. And then, incredibly, fast forward almost 300 years.
They find it.
They find a wreck, yeah. In 1996, off the North Carolina coast near Beaufort, a private research firm, Intersol Inc., located this shipwreck, and the evidence strongly suggests it is the Queen Anne's Revenge.
That must have been an amazing moment. What kind of things have they found?
Just incredible stuff. A treasure trove for archaeologists. They brought up around 30 cannons, for starters. And they're from different places, Swedish, English, French, which matches the accounts of Blackbeard adding guns from captured ships.
So not just the original French cannons.
Exactly. And loads of smaller things, too.
Yeah.
A little brass weight, used for coins, stamped with Queen Anne's face. Part of a wine glass celebrating King George III's coronation, which is ironic, given Blackbeard was defying him. A fancy French hunting sword, bits of pottery, pewter plates, even a urethral syringe, which gives you a slightly less glamorous glimpse into medical care at the time.
Wow. Everyday objects that bring the people on board to life.
They really do. And finding some cannons still loaded, that really points to it being an active pirate ship, probably Blackbeard's, abandoned suddenly. The research is still going on, too. They've identified specific Swedish cannons made around 1713. They even found tiny scraps of paper packed into a cannon as wadding.
No.
Yeah, and managed to identify it as coming from a specific book of sea voyages printed in 1712.
That's just unbelievable detail. Amazing preservation. But I feel like I remember hearing there were some issues around the wreck. Legal stuff.
Oh, yes. It hasn't been smooth sailing, pardon the pun, because the wreck is in North Carolina state waters. The state owns it. But the company that found it, Intersol, and another company that filmed the recovery, Nautilus Productions. They've been in long legal battles with the state over rights, media, contracts.
Money and control as usual.
Pretty much. There was even a controversial state law nicknamed Blackbeard's Law, trying to make all the photos and videos public domain, which caused a huge fight over copyright. That law got struck down, I think. But the disputes highlight how complicated it gets when you find something this famous and valuable underwater.
Yeah, a real shame when history gets tangled up like that. It reminds you the past isn't really past sometimes. Okay, so the ship meets its end, possibly deliberately. But Blackbeard himself keeps going for a bit longer, right? Until his own final stand.
That's right. His reign of terror, as it was often called, was drawing to a close. The authorities, particularly the governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, were determined to stop him. They bypassed the possibly more lenient North Carolina governor and organized a mission.
And they sent a specific person after him?
They did. Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy. He was given command of 2 small sloops, HMS Pearl and HMS Ranger. Though they weren't heavily armed, they had to be shallow draft to navigate the inlets. Maynard was described as determined, experienced. He had the job. Hunted down Blackbeard.
And he found him. Where did the final showdown happen?
Ocracoke Inlet, back in those tricky North Carolina coastal waters. Blackbeard probably felt relatively safe there, with all the sandbars and shallow channels.
Somewhere he knew well.
Exactly. The confrontation happened on November 22nd, 1718, early morning. Maynard's sloops cornered Blackbeard's vessel, the Adventure.
And it came to a fight.
A very brutal one. Boarding actions, close quarters combat. It was fierce by all accounts. Maynard and Blackbeard supposedly fought face to face.
A dramatic end for a dramatic figure. Okay, so we've traced his path, the mysterious start, the rise, the image, the ship, the final battle. But there's always that one big question with pirates, isn't there? Buried treasure. Did Blackbeard leave behind chests of gold? What do the sources say?
The million-dollar question? Maybe literally, but honestly. This is where the legend really runs wild, far beyond the facts. We look at historical accounts and even, checked what people who really dig into pirate history say online, like on Reddit forums dedicated to this stuff.
And no map with an X?
No. The consensus, both historically and among enthusiasts, is that while Blackbeard certainly captured a lot of valuable stuff, goods, supplies, some money, there's just no credible evidence of him burying some massive hoard of treasure somewhere.
Well, all those stories are just stories.
Pretty much seems that way. Pirates needed to pay their crews, buy supplies, repair ships, bribe officials. Money got spent or distributed according to their own rules, like we talked about. If there were massive amounts left over when he died, they were likely seized by Maynard's men or the authorities.
That Reddit point you mentioned earlier is interesting then. Maybe his real treasure wasn't gold.
I think that's a really insightful way to look at it. His treasure was his reputation, the fear he created, that image. That was his currency in many ways. It let him take ships, sometimes without even firing a shot. Intimidation was his gold standard.
So maybe the enduring legend is the treasure he left behind.
I think you could absolutely argue that. Because even without a mountain of documented gold doubloons, here we are, centuries later, still fascinated by him. He's arguably the most famous pirate ever.
Which brings us back to that question. Why? Why does Blackbeard Edward Teach still hold such sway over our imagination? What is it about his story, the transformation, the fear he wielded, that carefully crafted image? What does it tell us about, I don't know, ambition maybe, or the power of myth itself?
Exactly. What is it about creating an identity so powerful that it outlives you so dramatically, even when the buried gold probably never existed? That's something really worth thinking about.
It definitely is. Well, thank you for navigating those historical waters with me. It's been fascinating getting a clearer picture, separating the man, Teach, from the myth of Blackbeard.
My pleasure entirely. It's always compelling to look past the legend, isn't it? Though the legend itself is pretty compelling too.
It certainly is. And thanks to you for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope you'll dig into some of the sources yourself and explore more about this whole era of piracy. Let us know what you think and if you have ideas for other deep dives.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Until next time.